Hey guys, this is Ryan from rm-sounds.com, and in this tip I'm going to show you how to make your own acapellas in Ableton. And you can do this if you happen to have an instrumental version of the track you're working on, but if you can find an acapella, then by all means use that, because sometimes finding the instrumental is just as hard. But if you don't have an acapella and you do have an instrumental, there is a way to isolate the vocals from the mix. And this uses a technique called phase inversion, which basically flips a waveform upside down. All the peaks become valleys and all the valleys become peaks. What you can do is if you combine the original version and the phase inverted version, and they're both completely identical other than one being phase flipped, they'll cancel each other out completely. So using an original version of a track and an instrumental version of a track, assuming the only difference between the two is the vocals, if you phase invert one of them, it doesn't matter which, you will cancel out everything but the vocals. You'll cancel out everything that's the same about the two tracks. In theory, this works. In practice, it's not perfect because there are mixing and mastering fluctuations between the two tracks. For example, the vocal version may have been compressed differently on the master than the instrumental version. So you're always going to have little artifacts in there, but quite often they don't sound any worse than a vocalist's, headphones bleeding through the mic, right? So in the context of a remix, quite often it can be quite usable. So I'm going to show you how this is done in Ableton, but you can translate the concepts to any DAW. I'd be surprised if any bit of software didn't have a phase inversion button somewhere. So it's a little bit different, but the concept is the same. So in this demo, I'm going to use a track by Imogen Heap called Tidal off of her album Eclipse, which I have the deluxe version of, which includes instrumental versions of all her tracks. So I can isolate her vocals and use them for my own purposes. So I'll play you a bit of this song. So that's that, and now I'm going to bring in the instrumental version. I'll turn off the grid and try and line it up the best you can. So this is where you begin. You want the waveform to be identical on both tracks. You want it to line up perfectly. So what you're going to do is you're going to find some sort of landmark that you can visually use to line them up. So I'll use this hit here, right near bar 13, which is this hit on the second track. So line them up and just keep zooming in and lining up best you can. Every time you zoom in, look for a new landmark. Now I'll use this peak here, which corresponds with this one there. And just keep going right on in and try and line it up the best you can. It doesn't have to be perfect. I'm going to purposely have it a little bit off just so I can show you how you fine-tune it later on. So that's close enough. So now, hold on, my mouse is screwing up here. Oh, don't tell me my mouse battery's dying. That was weird. My mouse just froze up for some reason. Anyway, so where were we? So once you get it lined up the best you can, you're going to go into your devices, your live devices, and you're going to grab a utility device and drop it on each track. And on one of the tracks, like I said, it doesn't matter which one, you're going to invert the phase of the left and right channel. So you do this down at the bottom of the utility device. Turn both of them on. Now already if I play it back, you're going to hear a severely degraded version of what you just heard. Kind of sounds like somebody put a high pass filter on the track. And that's actually a very good way of listening for the sweet spot where they're perfectly lined up. It's going to sound like a filter sweep. The closer you are to the sweet spot, the higher the cutoff frequency of the high-pass filter. And as you move away from the sweet spot, you're going to introduce more low-end stuff. So to tweak it, to fine-tune it, you use Ableton's built-in track delay. And if you don't have that shown up by default, it's just this little button down here on the side that has a D on it. So set one of the tracks to sample, which means we're going to move this left or right by a specified number of samples. It's the most accurate, or it's just the smallest division of time you can work with here. So what you're going to do is you're going to play it back, find a part of the song where there's no vocals, and loop a very small section, something like that, and just play it. And I'm just going to click on the number and just use my keyboard arrows up and down to find that sweet spot. So let's listen to what that sounds like. So as you can hear there, I had it after only a few samples, and then I kept going and it started bringing it back in, bringing that cutoff frequency back down, which means you've gone past your sweet spot. So had I set it at 0 and gone in the other direction, here's what that would have sounded like. So you can hear very clearly it does sound like a filter sweep there. So bring it in until you hear as little as you can, and then once you start hearing it coming back in, then you've gone too far. So I think that was around 4 or 5 or something. No, it was actually around 2 samples. So you can hear there is still a little bit in there. It's not perfect, but you know, once I play it back with the lyrics here, with the vocals, sorry, you're gonna hear that it's actually not that bad. So let's see what happens. I'll try and adjust it with the vocals, see how that sounds. Yeah, very clear. You can hear that 2 samples of a delay is the sweet spot. I've plotted everything I know just let it play through so you can hear. Flash frozen, patchworked and fallow. I sprung up in hot. Sometimes another thing you can do is actually go to mono, and you're cutting out all the extra garbage you don't need, because most of the time the beef of the vocals is right down the center. You might lose a little bit of stereo spread, some reverb, but you're going to get the gist of it. So I can show you what that sounds like. You just change the width on the utility down to 0 on both tracks. So we've cut out a little bit more that way, but we also have sacrificed quite a bit from the vocals. So it's your call. Again, it totally depends on the context that you're using it in, the tracks you're using. But that's basically the technique right there. Comes pretty close. It really depends on your remix. If it's a very dense remix, all those, you know, the synths and drums that you were hearing in the background, those would completely get lost in the mix. If it was a very sparse mix, you know, you might hear some of those things. But, you know, if you got your tempos lined up and everything, then, you know, it's not the most noticeable thing in the world. So that's the technique. Hopefully that helps some of you out, and you can have some fun with that. And, you know, feel free to comment or post any links to sounds you've made using this technique as always. But we'll see you next time. Thanks a lot. Bye.